What's up, everyone? Coach Powers here, and I want to talk about Seth Doane's 60-minute segment on benzos. The segment looked at a young woman who reportedly had a sexual assault as a teenager. She got put on xanax. Quickly, the doctors put her up to 6 milligrams of xanax, which is around 90 milligram equivalent of Valium. So for anyone who doesn't understand those numbers, 2 milligrams of Valium can sedate or knock someone out that's never been on the drug before. I've personally seen it. I've personally experienced it. 2 milligrams of Valium, it's a very low dose, can have a very sedative quality to it. So imagine 90 milligrams of Valium. And when I was going through my own benzo dependence and journey to recovery, I got up as high as 40 milligrams of Valium. But this was over a period of several years, 8-9 years. A lot of people stay much lower. I didn't have luck with it. I had to keep going up higher and higher in my dose. The girl in this segment, in a very much shorter period of time, more than double the dose that I had been on, which is, like, again, a very high dose. Most people don't see doses that high. So one of the most interesting things that came out of this discussion, I felt, was that the young girl in this segment reported that her doctors gave her no warning about the potential dangers of benzos, being on a high dose or being on benzos for a long period of time, or what a taper, coming off the drug could look like. One thing that Seth talks about in this segment is tapering. However, I want to make a point on this because at least half of physicians either rapidly taper or cold turkey their patients off benzos. And that's a huge distinction that needs to be made here. Tapering off a drug over several months versus several weeks is an incredible difference in the profundity of withdrawal effects and the potential risk for self-harm or developing other more serious mental illnesses. So when we say tapering, what exactly are we talking about here? What we're actually talking about in most cases is a rapid taper or a cold turkey. So the strongest impression that I received from this segment was that people are not being warned about the dangers of their benzo. And in that, I think we may see a class action lawsuit at some point. I think it's deserved. I mean, could you imagine buying a car, paying for it, driving off the lot, getting up the road a couple miles, and then, the steering wheel falls off or something like that, and you wreck the car. You go back to the car lot and you say, hey, I got 2 miles up the road and the steering wheel came off. And then they say, oh yeah, we forgot to tell you that could happen. Another thing that Seth did that I thought was great is he contacted Viatris, which is the makers of Xanax, which of course they took no responsibility for the potential dangers of their product. Viatris, which made roughly $12 billion in 2020, who also works with other big pharma, big tobacco, big alcohol to lobby against things like marijuana, medicinal purposes and recreational, but particularly medicinal. And I think there's something very telling about that when you have a company who's that powerful, that large, lobbying against something like marijuana, which is being shown in more and more emerging research to be a great alternative, for medicine against things like anxiety, depression, eating disorders, personality, PTSD, all kind of stuff. Not to sound like a conspiracy nut, but you really get the picture that these people aren't in the business of really helping people. They're in the business of making money and eliminating other people that might actually help people, which would then hurt their cells. Again, this reminds me a lot of what we saw with big tobacco and alcohol. Eventually, we did see those companies being pressured to better address the dangers in their products, but really that was just a PR move to cover their asses, let's be honest. Big tobacco and alcohol would put out little snips of disclaimers and warnings, but then spend millions and millions of dollars in promoting adverts that glorified drinking and smoking their deadly products. At the end, usually in a rushed, quiet tone, we might hear, please use responsibly. Well, that's a little bit contradictory when you're showing beautiful, happy people on boats and doing all these, dancing and having these amazing times, drinking and smoking these products, followed by, in a quiet tone, please use responsibly. Big alcohol and tobacco has spent millions of dollars lobbying against marijuana. And not only big alcohol and tobacco, but big pharma. Because these three companies, which have some of the highest related death rates, disease, destruction tolls, they proclaim to care about people. And they don't want to see them using that pesky marijuana ruining their lives, right? That's what we're being told, right? That's why they're doing it. It's not because it's smart business and they're trying to eliminate competition because they know if people use marijuana medicinally or recreationally, they're much less likely to use their tobacco, alcohol, or their pills. So I want to talk about quickly before I get back to this article because it really brought up a lot of interesting points. I want to talk about big pharma and marijuana, and this is not about marijuana. This is not about a pro marijuana video necessarily. Although I am pro marijuana use for medicinal purposes, I've seen many people enhance their life, enhance the quality of their life, treat mental illness through the use of marijuana products, sometimes very low grade stuff, so sometimes mixed with CBD or something. And I think we need to remove the stigma. I don't know how chewing up Xanax became in vogue, but smoking a joint to relieve your pain or your suffering is somehow evil. I mean, well, I do know how that happened, and there's a long documented history of how and why, and it gets very political at some point. But I do want to address this because it's all connected. Alcohol, tobacco, big pharma, all working together to suppress information, to paint a different picture of what's going on out there, and quite literally spending lots of money to lobby against marijuana or any alternative coming up that might hit their pockets. And I think that's a dirty, disgusting thing. And in an age where we're public shaming everybody, I don't know how these guys get a pass. So here's one article from lowhud.com, and I'm just going to read you a snip from Big Pharma and Marijuana. There's a segment on Big Pharma and Marijuana. It says, pharmaceutical industry lobbying has targeted state and federal marijuana laws for years, including the largest anti-pot donation during Arizona's legal weed debate in 2016, government records show. Hey, that was an interesting year, 2016. What unique thing happened that year politically, I wonder? The largest anti-pot money trail in Arizona led to INSYS Therapeutics Incorporated, which made a $500,000 donation to the campaign opposing recreational marijuana. The legalization push ultimately fell short of voters' support, but efforts to renew it are ongoing. So this is still ongoing. This is not stopped. So this company, Insys Therapeutics, is a pharmaceutical company that makes a fast-acting form of fentanyl for pain relief in cancer patients. So fentanyl, which is another great opioid epidemic emerging right now. Lots of people ruining their lives, getting addicted. Then again, not attacking opiates necessarily because they can be wonderful, but that's another area where you're seeing a lot of disgusting things happening, a lot of destruction and death. And I don't know, I haven't seen that commercial. What about you guys? You seen a lot of anti-fentanyl or fentanyl warning commercials? That's weird, huh? It also touts on its website a compatibility to develop pharmaceutical cannabinoids, the active components of marijuana plant. So now you see a little bit of a hypocrisy here where they're so against it, they're lobbying against this pesky, evil marijuana until they find a way to get in there and line their pockets with that green dollar, pun intended. In a statement, Insys said it opposed the legal marijuana proposal because it fails to protect the safety of Arizona's citizens, and particularly its children. Can you believe that? A company pushing fentanyl and big pharma is worried about children. It's worried about protecting the safety of children. I mean, it almost makes you vomit listening to this crap. Similar links between pharmaceutical interests and marijuana lobbying have also fueled national political platforms. New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, for example, is among the list of Democratic presidential candidates who said they would seek legalization through Marijuana Justice Act. It would legalize marijuana nationwide and expunge convictions of people who have been convicted of marijuana offenses, which, by the way, ruins lives. I mean, quite literally ruins lives. Maybe you're smoking marijuana, maybe just a joint to help deal with some PTSD issues you have. And you don't want to rely on all these psychotropic big pharma medications that could have incredible negative impact on your mental health, which you could become addicted and dependent to, which could literally disable you or push you to suicide. And you're smoking a little bit of marijuana and you get arrested. And, right out the gate, you're looking at about $5,000 in fines. You're looking at court fees. You're looking at, besides being arrested, maybe your car was impounded, and you're looking at bail. You're looking at community service, usually 30 to 50 to 100 hours of community service. So if you're already someone who's suffering from something and you're smoking this drug to try to help alleviate your afflictions, maybe you're already partially disabled. And now the government's not going to care about that. You're going to be required to go do community service. And community service usually is a lot of hard work. So if you can't do that work, guess what? You're going to violate probation. Guess what? That's more thousands and thousands of dollars, rearrest, more time, more probation, more community service. I mean, the system in some ways is sort of designed to keep people in it. And that's not conspiracy talk, guys. That's just the way it is. So last year, Gillibrand criticized pharmaceutical opposition to medical marijuana on social media, calling Big Pharma's actions wrong because in many cases, it wants to continue to sell addictive drugs and dominate the market for drugs that address chronic pain. Yeah, absolutely. Among other things, not just chronic pain, physically, mental, emotional pain, xanax, SSRIs, things like that. So there you go. Well, I'll read a little more. One of the drug industry's largest trade groups, Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America, known as PHRMA, Pharma, has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on lobbying in New York alone, but disclosures didn't indicate if any money went to recreational marijuana debate this year. The group's targeted legislation in 2019 related to the state's health and mental hygiene budgets, Medicaid, and price gouging on pharmaceuticals. It also listed general state budget issues as part of its overall lobbying disclosures so far this year, which totaled about $168,000. So if you want to read that article, it's on LowHUD. I'll post a link. There's a lot of interesting stuff on here. I talk about the anti-pot group. It talks about alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana, Big Pharma. It's some delicious stuff in there. Anyway, let's get back to Seth Doane's growing addiction to anti-anxiety medication, debilitating withdrawal symptoms video. And I'll have a link here for that too if you haven't seen that. So first off, cheers to Seth for addressing this topic because it is taboo. It's sort of under the surface. A lot of people don't know what's really going on here. And then you can tell even in the comments section, there's a lot of people that don't even agree with this. They think, well, look, you're stigmatizing me for being on a benzo, and I get that response. I totally empathize with that response because some people really do feel that. They're like, hey, I'm just taking as my doctor prescribed. I have this situation and I need a benzo, and now you're scaring me, and almost they feel attacked for being on a benzo. And we don't need to do that. We never need to attack anyone who's taking their drug as prescribed, right? Or otherwise. You're taking the drug because you're having a problem. You're trying to get help. But the inconvenient truth of the matter is benzos are not a long-term solution. They're a very short-term solution to a long-term problem. The fact is that benzos are, even by AMA, the American Medical Association's own admission and guidelines, they're meant to be used for a very short period of time. I mean, several weeks at the most. Yet I have clients alone that have been on it 30, 40 years, and as new laws came out and more research came out pushing those laws, showing that benzos can do a host of negative things to people who've used it for long periods of time: memory issues, health issues, dependence, depression, debilitating symptoms coming off, which many people can, go on to commit suicide or just completely become disabled. So I want to read some of the comments from CBS Morning's video here on benzo use, and I want to address some of these because I felt they were very interesting. First one says, teenagers don't need high-grade drugs like Xanax. I couldn't agree with that more. Teenagers are going through a crisis already, and it's an addressed psychological crisis stage, one that's very closely tied to identity and their place in the world and who they are, and who their parents expect them to be, who society expects them to be. It's a very traumatic, critical, phase of a person's development. One that as an adult, we can't even remember really what it was like to feel that lost and confused about who we are and where we're going. So teenagers, they need help adjusting through this crisis, that critical period of finding themselves. That alone, they need help. And of course, there is a lot of bad things going on in schools, bullying, sexual assaults, like is the case with this young woman in this video. And even then, drugs are not the answer for that. Maybe for a very, very, very short period of time. Maybe if she had severe, PTSD reaction and she was, having panic attacks and couldn't sleep for a short period of time, maybe a short-acting, brief use of benzo could have sort of, annihilated the insomnia and helped her with, adjunct therapy, got her back on track with things. But they don't do that. They usually just throw the drug at you, and when that stops working, we'll throw an antidepressant. And looking at this young woman, and it looks like she's gained some weight since the pictures that they shown before she was on benzos, and also based on the bowl full of prescription bottles in front of her, I'm guessing that's not all benzos. She likely was put on other things, maybe a gabapentin, maybe some antidepressants, maybe even more than one benzo. So you got a lot of stuff going on, and she's so young, and she's likely going to have to, battle her way back off of all of that stuff. So I agree. Teenagers don't need Teenagers don't need Xanax. They really don't. There's really no example I can think of for that other than some short use for severe insomnia or something like that. Another comment says, my daughter will thank me later in life for not putting her on these meds. She can make her own decisions after her brain is done growing. Again, I agree with that. Another comment says, while the majority of people who use these anti-anxiety drugs should only use them for a limited time, a few of them needed to be on benzos before they ever took a benzo, and they will need to take them for the rest of their lives. When their doctors decide to stop giving them benzos, it can ruin their lives. The majority of benzo users can stop using benzos. For them, it may take a long time. I agree with that. And here's one that's very interesting. And this is a very divisive comment, this is really the one I wanted to address. This person says, can we please keep in mind that some people really need this medication, sick of the stigma. See, now here's where we're finding a division in the benzo community, and this is very important, guys, because if we're trying to alert people to this problem and we're trying to make changes here, this is a problem right in our community from users. This isn't big pharma talking. This isn't doctors burying their heads in the sand or gaslighting their patients. This is people who are on the drug who, as they understand it, they are sick and they need it. And they're tired of the stigma. All right. So there's two different problems. There's two different beliefs. One, that they need the medication, which we can challenge that. And two, that there's a stigma to being on it. And the stigma is coming from us now, they're saying, from people in the benzo community that's trying to get them off. It's the people like us that don't understand that some people need it. Well, that's not a complex idea, right? We understand the concept that some people may need benzos or may need a drug. But the reality is, benzos isn't the answer. It's almost like saying, hey, some people need heroin. Some people need to just drink some alcohol in the evening. I mean, where do you draw the line there? Well, it's alcohol. It's legal. If you're 18, just like a lot of medication, you can take it. And some people will absolutely get relief from alcohol if they had a few beers or a glass of wine in the evening. So who's to say they don't need it? Furthermore, benzos and alcohol are so similar. I mean, they're so similar in the way they affect the brain and the molecular structure of the drug. So the argument is strong there. Why some people need to drink in the evening. Of course, it's not that they need benzos and they need to drink or do drugs to medicate, but some people need help with benzos. Some people need help with their anxiety or what they're going through. So let's rephrase this. Can we please keep in mind that some people really need this medication? No. Let's keep in mind that some people really need help with their anxiety. Well, nobody's disputing that. But how do we get help? What kind of help? What does help look like? The second part of the comment, sick of the stigma. So now this is the most interesting part. What stigma? What are we talking about here? And to me, it suggests the stigma coming from the internal, inside the benzo community. I'm tired of people telling me that I shouldn't be on benzos, and maybe even other people saying that. I'm sure, family, why are you on drugs? You shouldn't be on drugs. I get that bigger part of it, So really, there's two parts here. There's stigma coming from society, people not on benzos who don't know anything about benzos, people who probably don't even suffer from mental illness. God bless them, they don't really understand it. And to that, I agree. Like, we do need to change people's opinions on things. We need to educate people, and I think that's happening. I think that's happening really organically, socially. Like, you're seeing so much of a push now on social media to, spread awareness about these things, and I'm seeing more and more people uh, become aware of this, and it's affecting more and more people as well. And it always has. Let's be honest, it always has. It's just that people, we haven't talked about it. We've kept it quiet. We've denied it. That doesn't affect me later in life. Maybe you go, looking back, yeah, I guess maybe I was anxious. Maybe I did battle some things. So being sick of the stigma, as it pertains to society, is something that we're working on. But being sick of the stigma based on people in the benzo community pushing this idea that people need to get off benzos, that one I don't agree with. I think we should be alerting people to the dangers, and I like this very 60-minute segment draws attention to, is that these drugs can have profound negative consequences, and they're not meant to be used long term. So again, for this comment, can we please keep in mind that some people really need this medication? I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. Most people, I really don't think anybody needs this medication. They may need other medications, but again, this is a highly addictive drug that is not meant to be taken for long periods of time, which, if taken for long periods of time, can have incredible negative health consequences, can even greatly increase dementia rates. Okay, so it's not something that, it's almost the same argument for opiates, right? Well, some people have pain and they just need to be on opiates for the rest of their life. What people? What are we looking at here? Because I'm someone who dealt with a lot of lower back issue, a lot of pain, physical injuries, had my lower back broken in 3 places, and I went down the road of the opiates, and you get tolerant of them just like any other drug. You need higher dosage. They don't work. Maybe for cancer people, maybe for people late stage, certain disabilities that are very painful, very, very small population. That's when nothing else just can work, and those are very rare cases. So what I'm seeing here is, my problem with this comment is it sort of makes a sweeping generalization, and it almost excuses anyone can kind of go under this umbrella and say, yeah, I need benzos. But do you really? Probably not. Most likely not. And really, 99% of people don't, and they can benefit from talk therapy, exercise, exposure, all kinds of therapies, personal work. Benzos are not the long-term solution. That's the gist of it. I like this comment. Benzos were never meant to be taken long-term. That should be the first, second, and last thing said. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Another comment says, doctors know exactly how addictive Xanax is, and they get kickbacks. Well, that's true too, and I think there are changes being made, but really it's not about having kickbacks, guys. It's just a quick, easy solution. I mean, I look at psychiatry, and I do respect psychiatry, but in some ways, like as someone who works in mental health, who provides treatment for people, and went to school to study for years, the cause of mental illness, and how we treat it, and what it looks like, and what it is, it looks so delicious to just be able to put everything under that umbrella of, here's a pill. If you have anxiety, don't matter. I mean, you look in the DSM-5, and there's 100 different anxiety disorders, let's say, and we could just give them a pill. Boom. And if you have depression, boom, here's this pill. And if you're feeling a little psychotic, boom, here's this pill. And if you're too sped up, here's this pill. And if you're not sped up enough, here's this pill. I mean, you could almost have 4 pills, 4 categories, and just as soon as your patient comes in, just quickly ask them what they're feeling, and then pick one of the 4 categories of pills to give them. And I know that's a great, reduction of what psychiatry is, but in a lot of ways, this works this way. And I've got a psychiatrist in my family. I've seen psychiatrists in action. Sometimes people don't even get to sit down. They come in the office, and hey, and if they are sitting, it's 15 minutes, and boom, here you go. And it's just, it's got to be the easiest thing to be a psychiatrist, it feels like. And of course, if the drugs don't work, well, then you can gaslight the client or the patient. It's your fault. You're resisting the drug. You're not taking the drug as prescribed, or you're not following my orders, or here's 2 or 3 other drugs. We can just keep hitting with a bunch of stuff under this umbrella that mental illness is all chemical. And that's the last thing I want to talk about here, is mental illness is not all chemical. Okay, chemistry Thoughts, behavior, or a continuum that needs to be said and understood, profoundly needs to be understood, guys. Okay, so what do I mean by continuum? I mean your thoughts influence your behavior, influences your chemistry, influences your thoughts, influences your behavior, influences your chemistry, right? So psychiatry's solution here is just jump in the middle there and boom, hit the chemistry. And in some ways, that's true. If you can affect the chemistry, then thoughts and behavior will actually change on their own. And that is true, but not always. And especially when it's a deep-rooted belief, and especially when it's things that need to change. We're not causing changes. You hate your job, you hate your marriage, you hate something about your life or yourself, or had gone through something profound that you haven't integrated, you haven't processed appropriately and digested and healed from. These drugs don't do that, guys. They just mask. That's all they can do is mask. If you hate your job and you're depressed over it, I can give you an antidepressant and it'll make you feel less depressed. Didn't change anything about your job, your marriage, anything in your life. Thoughts, behavior, chemistry are a continuum. If you change the thoughts, if we can change the behavior, we can change the chemistry. That's a fact. That is a 100% scientific fact. So what are you guys' thoughts on this article and some of these comments and some of the stuff that we're talking about here? Leave a comment down below. Let me know. I'd like to interact with you guys. And of course, if you like this, give me a like and maybe subscribe for more content. And I'll talk to you guys soon.